The Earth has completely entered the Ice Age and everything was freezing little by little.
Temperatures around the world began to drop, and there are no signs that it will stop. But even so, the world must not lose hope.
The government has not forgotten us. If we stick together, we can overcome this crisis.
These were the reporter's last words before being hit by a plane that froze while flying through the air. The transmission that was already bad is now completely frozen, if you know what I mean. As much as the frozen plane had to fall somewhere, did it have to fall right on the poor reporter? Now we are inside what looks like a cold chamber, but it is actually just a completely frozen room. A man was heading towards his house door while holding an iron rod. He was going to the door because someone had called him from outside. It was a desperate and very beautiful blonde, by the way, who was calling the boy by his name. The boy named Han Feng realizes it was Hyona, his acquaintance, and questions what she is doing at his door. But soon the boy ignores his own question and invites the girl in, claiming it is dangerous outside. The girl, in turn, puts her hand on the door and gives a big frozen kiss to the boy, who blushes and is left without reaction. They stay there for a few seconds exchanging juicy saliva. For a brief moment, I thought their tongues would freeze after they finished kissing. The virgin, still in shock, says that she kissed him as soon as he closed the door and that this is not normal coming from Hyona. The girl, on the other hand, says that he is the only one for her and that he can see the world in true colors even during this crisis. So she will stay with him no matter what happens. Asking if the boy does not believe her, the girl tells him to feel her heart and says she is willing to do anything with him now. The virgin, upon hearing anything, already turned red and started thinking about naughty things. As usual, the girl, to further fuel the boy's fire, puts her leg in that place, which makes the boy start to breathe hot air through his nose. Could this be the secret to thawing the world? Completely heated by the girl, he says that her words mean a lot, but he is soon interrupted by the blonde who tells him not to say anything more, then asks him to just close his eyes for her for a moment. While he questions what will happen now that he has closed his eyes, we can see a hand back there opening the door. So you can already imagine what happened next, right? The girl, trembling with fear, questions the boy if he really did that. The man says she should not play innocent now that the world has turned into hell since soon the food will run out. To summarize, they have to put all the cards on the table now and play the game until the rescue comes to get them, and all this before they starve to death. This was the sad ending of Han Feng. He could no longer move and began to think that this was how he should feel before dying. To make matters worse, before his death, he still saw the girl who had just betrayed him being groped by the other man while he said he would reward her today for her excellent performance. Watching this whole scene, Han Feng thinks that if he has a next life, he will not be this lovesick and needy puppy. It was at this moment that the light of hope appeared. According to the protagonist, this was a very warm light. Could this be the way to the long-awaited paradise? But when the boy tried to grab the light, he felt something strange in his hand. His body quickly began to break apart, then soon disappeared, feeling immense pain. It was at this moment that he woke up desperate and sweating. The boy had no idea where he was. At first, it was a very spacious room where the window was open, so it was possible to feel the breeze and the warm sunlight. 30 minutes later the sun was still there, and this was not a dream. Han Feng thought he would never feel the solar heat again. However, when checking the calendar, today was June 28th, and as far as he knows, the apocalypse began on July 15th, which led him to believe he died and returned in time half a month before the apocalypse began. So to summarize, he kind of reborn. But something was different this time, and it was his right hand that now had an intense red glow since he woke up. The boy did not feel pain or anything like that. He just thought it was very warm and soon thought he was hallucinating. But when he suddenly sneezed, his hand changed to green instead of red. The glow of his hand started to become increasingly brighter, which left him in a panic. Closing the balcony window of the building, the boy went back inside the room and already seemed exhausted. Then began to wonder if science can explain how a beam of light is coming out of his hand. At this moment, the light started to shrink again, and this was different from the red light that remained only at one size. Not knowing what to do, the boy sat on the couch, because he was completely tired and felt drained, suspecting that the green light was to blame. Then furious, he he started shaking his hand, trying to make the light disappear. Until suddenly he began to think that this situation is just like a manhwa story he used to read. The protagonists in those stories always get reborn, and all of them get reborn with insanely absurd powers. But soon the boy gets frustrated since the knife didn't seem to react to his green light. Suddenly his stomach started growling like the motorbikes that pass by on the street outside his house. But there was nothing to eat in his fridge unless he wanted to eat that bottle of water over there. To sum it up, this was very bad. If he didn't eat soon, things would get worse. It was then that he looked to the side and saw a pot with something inside. This was a pot with soybean seeds, and of course, it was better to eat this than nothing for now. So with his green right hand, he takes one of the seeds from the pot, throwing it towards his mouth with the intention of eating it, obviously. But at that moment the seed exploded. In the next instant, he had a whole soybean plant in his mouth. Where the seed was supposed to be, there was now the root of the soybean plant. Only then did he realize that the soybean seed had turned into the entire mature plant, and his exhaustion had disappeared along with this new revelation. The light that wouldn't leave his hand had also disappeared. Taking something from the plant's branches with his hand to check, the boy is astonished to see that his little seed had transformed into a bean sprout. Realizing he had an incredible power in his hands, our protagonist decides to study more about it. But at this moment, he has bigger fish to fry. The boy needs to stock up on supplies before the world starts to freeze over, if you know what I mean. A while later, birds were chirping. The entire city was running at 100%, and different noises were coming from all directions. Walking among the people, he starts analyzing everything that happened to him and how his powers work based on what has happened so far. But he still can't understand what kind of power this is. Suddenly someone approaches, calling his name. As he turns to see who the person was, we see a beautiful blonde girl saying it's a coincidence to find him here and asks if he's also going shopping. Then charmingly she says it's destiny to meet him like this. Realizing this was 𝔸𝕣ťί𝕔, our protagonist panics. This was the goddess of his dreams for 3 long years, the girl for whom he had done everything he could to make her happy. He knew he was nobody in his past life and didn't deserve anything good. But he never thought that in the end, it would be her who killed him, and this makes him furious. Then he began to squeeze his arm to try to control all his anger. While thinking that now was not the best time for revenge but to get supplies, the girl continued calling for him. She questions if he's listening since she's called his name several times. The boy just apologizes, saying that she looks so beautiful today that he got lost for a moment. Completely blushing, the girl tells him to stop it, questioning since when he's been so kind. But clearly, she's already trying to use our boy. Then again, trying to seem attractive, the girl asks if they should shop together today. But our 𝔸𝕣ťí𝕔, apologizing, just says he can't today and walks away like it's nothing. The girl is left speechless by our alpha's response. Of course, he knows she wanted to use him as a pack mule today, but that's not going to happen anymore from now on. So finally, we arrive at the Waldemar shopping plaza. This was the largest supermarket with the most supplies possible in this region. Of course, when the world froze, all the shelves were cleared in one night, and there was nothing left for anyone to eat. So Han Feng needs to stock up as much food as possible before this apocalypse starts. He was even checking a survival guide he found on the internet, which said to store food, warm clothes, medicine, daily necessities, gasoline, and many other things. But there was a much bigger problem he had forgotten, and this problem was called money. When he realized he had almost nothing, the boy almost freaked out. But suddenly his phone rings with the arrival of a message. The message was from some bank with a loan proposal saying he was approved to receive a good amount of money. How could our protagonist have forgotten about this? He quickly had an idea. The boy started downloading several loan apps since he knew he would only need to pay them back after the apocalypse had started, and by then, the banks would probably no longer exist. Suddenly we see someone kicking a soda can on the street. This was 𝔸𝕣ťí𝕔, completely furious. She was like this because the protagonist treated her as she deserved and stopped being her simp as he always had been. In her mind, she thought she would stop being nice to him since he's a broke guy who doesn't even have a car. Hearing the roar of a car engine coming from behind her, the girl turns to check. The sound came from a beautiful pickup truck that stopped right next to her. This was our protagonist mocking that once again destiny had brought them together. Still in disbelief, the girl realized that this was Han Feng, so she immediately asked if this car was his, and he answered yes. Approaching, our protagonist said that his father, who works in the United States, had given him a good sum of money and that he was now on his way to pick him up at the airport. Impressed, the girl was both incredulous and blushing at the same time, but soon she changed her expression. Looking sad, the girl apologized for asking to shop together earlier since she didn't know he was going to pick up his father. Then, crying, she said that he was so cold earlier that she thought he was abandoning their friendship. Smiling maliciously, he said she was a silly girl. Then our Giga Chad protagonist grabbed the girl's waist, pulling her close. Holding her chin, he said, why would he abandon her when she was so important to him? At this moment, the girl smiled maliciously. Then she started saying that he was also very important to her and even invited him to have lunch and watch a movie together today. But when she looked ahead, where was our alpha? The guy is colder than the coming apocalypse. However, looking to the side, she hears him complaining that it was very exhausting carrying so many things. This quickly made the girl ask what all those things were, to which the boy just said they were things he liked. But suddenly he said he had a gift for her, which made the girl very happy. So she said she was going home and would be eagerly waiting. The girl thought she had won in this game. But in fact, Han Feng just didn't want her to see his stockpile. After all, this is his survival ticket for the apocalypse. He just needs to let time pass so that both she and the guy who helped her kill him in his past life meet their end. Actually, the protagonist is starting to get anxious for this apocalypse. July 15th is the day when heavy snow will start falling, and temperatures will drop to -20°C. Then in the following months, it will continue to gradually drop to as low as -70°C, turning the entire world into a complete block of ice and preventing anyone from going outside. This is why he needs to stock up on food, and everything needs to be well packed and sealed so that the neighbors don't suspect anything. The most sensitive supplies he has to carry himself at night so as not to be noticed. After the apocalypse began, energy became very unstable, and that's where generators come in. But for that, a large stock of fuel is necessary. He also took the opportunity to change the heating system and make it independent, as well as reinforce the door and windows. After that, he set aside a room just to store all these supplies. Today was already July 14th, just one day before the apocalypse finally begins. So the next day, he will finalize his preparations. It's time to start preparing for the main event, which is literally studying his abilities. To survive this apocalypse, relying only on the supplies he's stored isn't very safe. Han Feng thinks his power to manipulate plants is his last hope. So he prepared a nice meal using the bean sprouts he grew with his ability. But in his mind, this was kind of strange since it was him who made them mature with his hands. Of course, he also doesn't know what the trigger is to make this work. Without further ado, the boy finally decides to taste and discover the flavor of this meal. A while later, half the food had already been eaten. This is because the food was definitely edible, and now it was proven that he could produce food. So now the next step is to learn how to use this ability. So far, he only tested the power with soybean seeds. Opening his well-stocked fridge, he decides he has to test his powers with other plants as well. This way, the beautiful sunny day went away. Time passed very quickly, and the sun was already setting. When the boy opened his eyes, there was a broccoli in his hand, and he began to question if he had fainted. The floor was covered with fruits and vegetables, but he could only think that his head was killing him inside. To sum it up, this ability completely affects his mind and body, leaving him completely exhausted. So again consuming the food to replenish his energy. Han Feng thinks he finally learned something about this ability he possesses. Before the boy crashed the car and fainted face down on the ground, he used his powers on various different plants. Many of these plants simply did not react at all. But some plants became completely developed, just like the soybean seeds did. And somehow, Some of them exploded. After the explosions, they looked like charcoal but were very light, which left him completely confused. These substances that the plants turned into could easily be used for heating. To summarize, his concerns about being cold inside the house at that moment disappeared. After that, of course, he continued for several more times and hours, but had no more success. So he tried to concentrate and control his breathing. And amazingly, he really managed to grow an entire broccoli in his hand. With this, he discovered that the chances of success are completely random and that the floor of his house is very hard. Black screen and sound of someone falling to the ground. To summarize, he couldn't find a pattern after all this, but at least he thinks he began to understand the conditions to activate the ability. The key to all this lies in his consciousness. He must imagine himself in nature, as if he were walking there, hearing, feeling, and seeing everything around him. His body and mind must be part of the natural world, but did he have to be naked there? As the boy slowly began to open his eyes, he realized it worked and that this is the key for Han Feng to activate his ability since it is linked to his consciousness. So in this way he puts various types of meat on the table. With his sticky green hand, he begins his attempt with a steak. As the meat didn't turn into a cow, he began to consider that his powers only work on plants, meaning he would have to become a herbivore. Desperate and tasting grass in his mouth, he starts to force his power, hoping it will work, but continues without success in his attempt to create a cow. Suddenly he stops and starts to feel two distinct colors inside him, and this way he remembers that he should test the red color. But he hopes he won't be disappointed again. Holding the piece of steak in his hands, he begins to concentrate. Soon the red light starts to emerge from his hand, and amazingly, the meat starts to react to it. But let's say it wasn't very pleasant, and the meat looked quite disgusting. This made our protagonist throw the meat on the ground in disgust. However, of course, he was curious and started to poke it to understand better. At least this time the meat reacted to his ability, but ended up taking on a strange shape. Is this all the red light has to offer? Analyzing the situation better, he realizes it isn't. It's as if the red light activated a disintegration process in the meat. At this moment, our protagonist had an idea, so he took some soybean seeds. His idea is what would happen if he combined the green light of evolution with the red light of disintegration holding both foods. By combining the two, the lights began to change color. The green and red turned into a bright yellow light, and that piece of meat became much larger. Of course, it didn't become a cow, but it's almost there. At first, it seems that the soybean seeds disappeared, and this leads us to believe they fused with the meat. By poking the piece of meat well, he understood that it has the same smell, the same touch. Everything is just like a fresh piece of meat, which made our boy excited and wanting to try again. But a few hours later, there were only what seemed to be pieces of charcoal or rotten meat on the floor. But even frustrated at having failed several times, he decided to continue his tests another time. Now he was happy because his day had been very productive and he made several discoveries. And like any ambitious person, he began to think that if he could master this power, soon he would become Captain Underpants and dominate the apocalypse. It was at that moment that he remembered he still didn't have a weapon for self-defense. So he started to pack everything quickly since he had to go to the streets to try to buy a weapon before the temperatures start to drop uncontrollably. But looking out the window, it seems that the fun had already begun. Sometime later, it was clear that the events for the apocalypse had indeed begun. Walking down the street, he remembers that in a week, the temperatures will have dropped to -45°C. So he urgently needs a weapon, and buying a weapon is illegal, which makes him question where he would get one. Suddenly he hears someone saying he is a builder who invests millions in each project. The guy who was shouting this was stopping everyone he saw, asking if they knew Lao Wang from the Shigang Leader group, saying this person was his big brother. This blonde guy with an exaggerated clothing style. In the vicinity, he is known among the residents as the homeless guy Joe, the guy who lives around here. His name is Li Zi, and everyone calls him brotherly. He has a reputation for hiring people on the street for projects, so he must know everyone around. But he is completely crazy and does not accept any type of cigarette other than constantly talking and praising his big brother without anyone asking anything. He doesn't have a job of his own but seems to be always busy, besides talking on the phone about receiving millions for helping his big brother. maybe this guy has the connections he needs to get his weapon. So he called out to the guy, saying it had been a long time since they last saw each other, which made him turn suspiciously. Realizing it was our protagonist calling him with a goofy face, the blonde guy immediately questioned if they knew each other. Of course, the protagonist introduced himself, asking if he really forgot, which made the blonde guy apologize for having a bad memory and ask if he could help with something. Our boy looked around suspiciously to check, then calmly approached the blonde guy and whispered in his ear that he needed a weapon. The guy panicked, shouting and asking why he needed that. This made our boy feel like an idiot, feeling he had asked the wrong person. The blonde guy, on the other hand, got furious and started saying that he really has the contacts, but he doesn't do anything illegal and also won't put his big brother in danger. The protagonist, trying to reverse the situation, said that he misunderstood. He just needed the weapon because he had some problems and needed to defend himself. So he began to tell that he was riding his bike to work when he was overtaking a man who was spitting everywhere. The man's spit hit his face. So, of course, the protagonist confronted the man, asking what he was doing, but the man spat on him again. Of course, the protagonist gave him a good beating that day. This made the man all beaten up and with his pants almost falling go away, threatening to come back and get the protagonist. The next day, the spitting man was waiting for him with his thugs and gave him a good beating, saying they would get him every time they saw him. Our boy had never been so humiliated, and that's why he would like a weapon for self-defense. The blonde guy, upon hearing this story, got furious, calling the spitting man an idiot, while the protagonist was stunned to see that he cared only about the spitting part. But soon the blonde guy came and hugged the protagonist, saying he would make a call to his big brother immediately to resolve this. The blonde guy also said that his luxurious car was in the shop, so they would have to take a bus. But soon the protagonist told him not to worry, as he had a car. Now on the way to the destination, the blonde guy asked how much the car cost, saying he was living the good life, and the protagonist said it cost around 700,000. While saying where to turn on the streets, he took the opportunity to take a selfie inside the car. Of course, he also posted this photo on his social networks. So finally, they arrived at the destination. Everyone outside noticed the arrival of a strange car at the location. Upon realizing it was Laoli, they asked what he came here to do, and the guy replied they came to see Boss Lu. But noticing that this car is the new Tiger truck, they began to ask if he bought it and how much he paid, and the scoundrel said he paid around 700,000. The protagonist was incredulous that he was saying he owned the truck right in front of the Real owner. Now inside, the boss welcomed them, asking why the blonde guy was at this place so late. However, the first thing the boy did was ask for a cigarette, but was refused since the boss was busy. So the boy said he brought this guy here to buy a weapon, which impressed the boss. Our protagonist immediately began to panic, especially with the boss staring at him maliciously. But suddenly the man said that the blonde guy brought someone just to buy a bad weapon. He thought it was something more interesting. Then he commanded his henchmen to show it, and the man understood. This weapon they put on the table now, the old man wants 600,000 for it. The boy, somewhat awkwardly, tried to explain that he would like a slightly larger weapon if the boss could understand him. He would like something with at least a scope to see his enemy from afar. At this moment, the boss seemed to start getting furious. Our protagonist again expected the worst possible response. Then the boss flipped out and started shouting if he really meant that he wanted a sniper rifle. Furiously, he continued shouting that this is not a damn shopping center, so he told him to buy the pistol or get out. But the blonde guy said it wasn't quite like that, and that he would tell the story, beginning to speak about 5 years ago when his wife, sometime later at the same location. The old man was furious, saying this was disgusting and that he was now irritated. To summarize, the blonde guy told a story similar to what the protagonist did with the blonde guy at the beginning about the spit. Suddenly the leader turned to our boy and said he would get the sniper rifle he wanted. He would make it happen, so he just needed a few days. At that moment, he ordered his henchmen to get it while the blonde guy boasted about his boss as always. But suddenly, the old man handed the weapon to the protagonist, saying to keep it and that it was a gift. Han Feng was left speechless by the old man's gesture. Then he ended up calling him to say something. The boy mentioned that he had a friend working in the government who had told him that something abnormal would happen with the weather soon, so they should buy as many supplies as possible to stay safe. The old man looked at him with a suspicious gaze. Our protagonist kept his serious face this time without backing down. Then the old man said he would do what the boy suggested. Did we really make friends with a city gangster? LOL. On the way back, the blonde guy was boasting again about his boss being the best guy possible, and the protagonist agreed, even saying he would buy cigarettes for him as a reward on the way back. During the journey, the blonde guy kept talking about cigarettes and the project they were working on, even promising to take the protagonist to a sauna when he received it. But our hero could only think at that moment about continuing to prepare and study his abilities before the real terror began. However, suddenly the protagonist slipped. He slipped on some snow that had formed on the ground and ended up falling. The blonde guy asked if he was okay while Han Feng could only scream in pain and complain about his leg. The pain was so unbearable that he thought it must be broken. So, handing the car keys to the blonde guy, he asked him to take him to the hospital. A bit embarrassed, the blonde guy said he unfortunately couldn't drive without a driver's license. Sometime later, he was red-faced from the effort of carrying the protagonist, while the protagonist was stunned by being in this situation and having only an idiot to help him. Then the blonde guy said he would call a taxi. Sometime later at the hospital, more specifically in the office, someone was saying goodbye to another person who would work late. Looking out the window, the girl noticed that the snow was getting denser, when suddenly the phone started ringing. During the call, someone called the head nurse to come down to the entrance because they were short-staffed. Back to the protagonist, it seemed he had indeed broken his leg when he slipped earlier, so now he had to stay under observation for an hour before receiving his medication. With the x-ray in hand, he thought that this had to happen to him just when the apocalypse was about to start. Suddenly the blonde guy said he was leaving and if he needed anything, just to call him. Our protagonist just sighed at the situation he was going through. The hospital he was in was now completely full due to the accidents caused by the heavy snowfall happening because of the low temperatures. Han Feng was already getting bored by the wait to receive his medication, when suddenly he saw something that made his eyes shine. He saw a nurse working at full speed. She was a beautiful nurse, giving her all with a smile on her face for her patients. Our boy was enchanted by her being the head nurse at such a young age. He was even more enchanted by her open legs while attending to others. He found her very beautiful. It left our superpowered boy completely dazed. Suddenly the old man next to him called for the head nurse. She quickly came to his request, saying she was very busy now and would attend to him soon, while the old man said his back suddenly started hurting. He kept stalling her with words while taking the opportunity to snap a photo from below that place you know. The girl said she would need to take an x-ray to tell what he had, but the old man, with a malicious look, told her to touch him and he would show where it hurt. He said this as he approached the girl and grabbed her waist as if to show where it hurt him. The girl just started laughing, saying he was very sensitive and that she would examine him soon. At that moment, the old man was even drooling. Then he moved his hand a little lower, saying maybe the pain was a bit further down. Suddenly something moved at high speed, and we heard a thud. The next moment, the old man was lying on the ground, and there was a crutch beneath him. Our protagonist just apologized, saying it was the first time he used one of those. Then he quickly picked up the old man's phone from the ground, asking him if it hadn't broken. The old man panicked, ordering him not to touch his phone. After the protagonist looked, the old man screamed for him to return it immediately. But it was as he had thought. The old man was really taking advantage of the nurses and taking photos of them. So he immediately confronted the old man, asking for a good reason not to call security and report him to the police. Han Feng still says he won't return the phone, and next time he sees him he'll spread his face on the internet. This leaves the old man completely furious. But with nothing else to do, he runs out the front door while the nurse asks him to wait. The girl is amazed that the old man has improved so quickly that he's running out, which makes the protagonist realize that she really doesn't understand things. So he quickly shows that the old man was filming her from below, and that he was a big pervert, which leaves the girl perplexed for not having noticed that. Blushing, our protagonist hands her the phone, saying that she should decide whether to expose him on the internet or hand it over to the police, but he warns her to be more careful. With a happy expression, she thanks him and says she would have asked earlier, but he wasn't with a broken ankle? Only then does he remember now that the adrenaline has passed and screams in pain. Sometime later the dressing was already done. The girl holding his foot with a happy expression asks if it still hurts, and he is told that it doesn't hurt anymore, and also thanks the girl. But she says she has to thank him for getting rid of the bad guy, as Han Feng just tells her to be more careful about her surroundings. But as he said that, the girl touched his foot in that soft. At that moment another nurse calls the head nurse saying they need help, leaving our passionate protagonist behind, telling him he should come back in a week for a checkup. He would certainly like to come back in a week to see her. Grabbing his crutches to leave, he leaves thinking he might never see her again. The next day the snow had already taken over everything.
We interrupt this program with urgent morning news. Within the next 24 hours, all regions of the country will experience heavy snow and a sharp drop in temperatures. Reports from our overseas correspondents show that temperatures are plummeting worldwide. Our experts, along with specialists from 46 other countries, are rushing to the UN to discuss the cause of this weather anomaly. Experts say this severe cold snap won't last long. However, please pay attention to disaster warnings in your area and follow the arrangements made by the local government. Please remain calm, do not believe or spread rumors, and refrain from hoarding supplies. This disaster shall soon pass.
Meanwhile, our Giga Chad is drinking his wine, thinking that as always the government has to lie to the people to avoid panic, and imagine that he would have believed that if it wasn't for his past life. But this time everything will be different since he is prepared. His entire warehouse is full, besides that the heating system has been improved. To summarize, everything is prepared and ready for him to no longer worry about surviving this apocalypse. Suddenly the chat group of the building where he lives starts firing with messages where people are complaining about the cold, and even saying that their bosses ordered them to work from home due to the amount of snow on the street. The protagonist continued watching until someone mysterious appeared in the group, warning everyone that this is not just an ordinary snowstorm but a snow apocalypse that will freeze everything. Seeing that someone knows about the apocalypse leaves our boy completely frightened. He must be careful with this anonymous individual who is in his building and also has knowledge. But soon people started talking about the cold and that they should go to the market, but always complaining that it was too cold for that and that there was a lot of snow on the way. This was the Happy Housing Complex Residents Conversation Group. People wanted an explanation from the building syndics about why they weren't clearing the snow. Already the syndics and responsible only said that the snow was too heavy and there was nothing they could do. Quickly the residents started asking for the administration fee money back. Our protagonist just thinks that there is no way to negotiate with the snowstorm and all this talk is useless. Suddenly someone named Jiang Shiryo appears, saying that it's no use just cleaning the snow because the storm is so strong that in just a few hours everything would be covered again. Then sort of warns that there's no use throwing frustration at them because there's nothing mere humans can do against a natural disaster. Quickly everyone gets even more frustrated, asking if he's also one of the syndics to be speaking for them like this. But the man says no, and that he's just talking objective and realistic things since no one is noticing this. Also says that trying to blame the administrative group won't get them anywhere, and that makes residents ask what they should do then. The man continues saying that basically they have to have an attitude and not just distribute free hate. That is, everyone must go down and try to find a solution. At that moment our protagonist begins to have some memories of this owner named Jiang in his past life. At least he was a very kind and gentle person. Suddenly someone enters the chat room saying that this was supposed to be complicated. To summarize, who wants to go out into the streets must go down and help, and who does not want to just shut up in the group. Then starts leaving the chat room again, saying that they should not lose half a day discussing just cleaning the snow. Everyone was silent for a moment. Then this black cat said that he would go down to help clean the streets quickly because he's busy making a few million with his boss, and with that we already know who this cat is. The protagonist himself has already connected that it is the big brother Blondie. Several people quickly started to agree and said they would go down to help clear the snow. Suddenly, someone very radiant said they would also help, but their strength wasn't much, and this seems to be the nurse, or I could be mistaken. Then another woman said she would also come down to help, and clearly this was the traitor Hyona. Han Feng was impressed that even she would help, Soon the crowd of simps rushed to say she didn't need to go and should stay home resting. Literally, she has the attention of almost everyone in the building, so our protagonist left the conversation. Of course, he still feels remorse for knowing the kind of person she is. Suddenly his phone started buzzing with new messages. It was Hyona asking what he had been up to in the past few days since he had said he would get in touch with her and the girl had been waiting until now. Right after, she sent another message saying he should take advantage of his trip and buy food for her at the supermarket on the way. Then she sent a very interesting photo, I must say. Our guy understood that even in this extreme cold she wore short clothes just to try to seduce him, but clearly she's trying to get him to do her chores. So the protagonist thought long before deciding what to reply to her. The next moment, he could already see her stepping on his phone cursing Han Feng's name. A while later, our protagonist is scrolling through stories on his phone. The internet, despite 2 days of intense cold, continues to work normally. So our mischievous boy decides to spend a good part of his time consuming this type of content. Of course, he soon got bored just doing that. His leg also isn't getting better, and probably because it will take months for his recovery to be complete. Going back to his phone, he finds an article about a person with self-regeneration powers. It seems that after receiving hospital treatment, the man got up and ended up jumping from the 50th floor. But when they examined his body, they realized he was recovering again. The TV report ends by saying to watch in the coming days to find out if this is true or not. But upon watching this crazy idea, our boy has an insane idea. Quickly, he activates his green power in his hand, then touches his leg intending to heal it. But nothing happened and the light started to disperse. So he concentrated and forced his power even more, increasing the brightness of the green light. But again, it didn't seem to work. After his frustrating attempt, he lies down annoyed since he thought it would work, and little by little, he started to feel sleepy. Then he ended up giving in and fell asleep. Suddenly, we see a goat screaming. Han Feng was wearing an indigenous headdress and was completely happy, literally riding the goat. He shouts that it's time to take the goats for a walk. However, several goat heads with wings appear flying in the sky. The boy was still entertained while swinging his whip, but soon was thrown up by the goat he was riding. When he hit the ground, he heard a bone-cracking sound coming from his leg. Then came the intense pain and lack of mobility. But suddenly, one of the goats started licking his wound. Finding it disgusting, the boy tries to push the animal away, which makes the beast completely furious. Then with its gigantic tongue, it grabs Han Feng's leg, suddenly lifts it up with monstrous strength, and we can see the green light of his powers emerging from the goat's tongue. Han Feng wakes up startled from this bizarre nightmare. Even I don't have crazy dreams like that, which makes us wonder what kind of herb the author smoked for this part. Suddenly, the boy snaps back to reality and realizes he was leaning on his leg, with a green light coming from it. Then, removing the bandages from his broken leg, he notices that it is brand new and ready for use. Realizing he doesn't feel pain anymore, the boy gets completely excited. Now he is in the kitchen, thinking about how the green light healed him while he slept. To summarize, he is in the kitchen and ready to better test this regeneration power of his. So even with fear and trembling, he did what he had to do, opening his eyes to check. There was a small cut on the tip of his index finger. He quickly activated his green light ability and gave a broad smile because now he knew how it worked. In front of the building, several residents gathered to clear the snow. Jiang thanks everyone for their hard work and apologizes for causing trouble to Mr. Liu during such a snowstorm. Liu says he didn't do much. Most of the work was done by the Jin brothers. The duo laughs, embarrassed by the elder's compliment. Suddenly, someone falls on there but in the snow near them. The boys warn the girl to be careful as the frozen ground is slippery. One of them holds her hand to help her up. Jin Jian thanks them for the help, saying they don't need to worry about her. The brothers explain that they will clear the main road and she can ask for their help if needed, but she says she can manage. Meanwhile, Jiang talks to Liu, mentioning that the snowstorm is getting worse and they will have to be quick to get supplies later. The elderly man mentions that talking about supplies reminds him of something, but when Jiang asks about it, he says it's something insignificant. It seems that in recent days, a neighbor has been bringing supplies in a truck as if moving. Jiang thinks it's normal. It could be someone who just moved in or is renovating their house. As Liu also saw gasoline tanks and a fireplace, it didn't seem like someone moving. It was as if the person was preparing to spend the winter. The Jean brothers return, announcing that they cleared the main road and they should be able to leave now, and they receive thanks from Mr. Liu. Then a guy appears behind them, finding it interesting that someone is making preparations for winter. Out of nowhere, a snowball hits the newcomer on the back of the neck. The woman Lu Yen is telling him to get back to work, but Wu retorts that he did all the work and she was just watching. Cutting off their conversation, Jiang tells them to stop arguing and mentions that the main road has been cleared. It's time to go to the supermarket for supplies, and Jin Jian happily agrees with him. The brothers talk about needing to buy many things and also send a message to their mother since she probably needs something too. Returning to Lu, he asks if Jiang thinks what he was talking about is related to the snowstorm. The man is briefly silent, until he responds that he's truly not worried about it. He thinks it's a brief snowstorm and soon everyone's life will return to normal. So what he heard has no relation to the snow. Even if he thinks the snowstorm won't stop, if someone in the neighborhood has a lot of supplies, it would be good for everyone. The elderly man laughs, saying that young people are indeed smarter. Then we see that the snow never stops falling. Jiang tells people to get ready to leave, as the snowstorm is increasing and they should return in 3 hours. So, the residents leave all together. We see that in one of the apartments the light remains on. The apartment belongs to the protagonist. Inside, Han Feng is sleeping peacefully, but someone starts knocking on his door, waking him up. He opens the door to his colleague, saying he was sleeping. The one who knocked was the blonde guy, and he says he brought the semi-automatic rifle Han Feng had requested. The blonde also says that his big brother asked him to thank him personally, since thanks to him he was able to store supplies. But he soon notices that the boy is upset and asks if something happened. This is because today they cleared the snow to go to the supermarket, and it seems someone had already cleared everything the night before, which even surprises the protagonist. Could it be that someone really knows things, like Han Feng? With that, they say goodbye, and the protagonist closes his door. Now he was pensive about how this person managed to take everything from the market in just one night. In comics and novels he read, some superhumans had the power to store things in dimensional spaces. Could there really be other superhumans like him but with that ability? Clenching his hand with his powers, he thinks all of this is very scary. Now sitting on the couch, almost with the bag out, he thinks he needs to learn more about his powers since he must be prepared in case there are more superhumans. According to his current knowledge, the effects of his ability can both increase size and quantity. So again, he takes one of the seeds from the pot, thinking that the success rate is very low and that the rate for soybeans is 1 in 10 while meat fails dozens of times in a row. As he activates his power, he wonders why this happens, when suddenly the seed explodes in his hand. Again, this was a failure, and it was very bad. Furious, he thinks he must figure out today how this works. Then a long time passed, and it was already 10:45 at night. An almost complete plant was in the hand of our protagonist. Finally, he had at least a little ability to do this. It seems that when using the green light of his ability, the energy is not constant. Each type of food has its own corresponding energy value, which will result in a failure if he gets this amount of energy wrong. Suddenly he realizes this model is a bit familiar. It is something very similar to an online dance game that became popular a few decades ago. The energy is like the direction of the buttons, and then each direction has to be correct at each second. It's as if he has to wait for the right moment to press the button with the correct direction. In his first attempt, he succeeded, which made him very happy. Going to the kitchen, he thinks he should now perform this same test with meat. Meats are different from vegetables since if it fails, it turns into something black and liquid, which is completely disgusting. Probably the principle of the theory should not be different. So first, he must understand the energy values required by the meat, and this should cost him more time than the vegetables. However, immediately the meat in his hand explodes with the mistake he made, and thus he failed once again. In the next instant, he failed again. To put it simply, he spent the whole day failing the meat energy sequence. Outside, the snow kept falling, and time passed very quickly. His kitchen was completely dirty with the black liquid. Everything was silent, and he continued his tests. With meat in one hand and soy in the other, he started again, activating both powers. Concentrating as much as he could, he activated at the right moment. This time it worked, and he finally managed to make the meat bigger. Even though he was exhausted, He was happy with his progress, so he collapsed on the floor from exhaustion after spending so much time testing this. And finally, he discovered the right amount of energy for the meat.
Good morning, viewers. Today is the 17th of July, the third day of the snowstorm. The entire country is experiencing the worst snowstorm of the century. To ensure standard basic living for everyone, defenses and measures have been taken for all locations. Due to the snowstorm, all traffic, electricity, and networks are starting to break down. Please patiently wait for maintenance by support personnels. The government is also delivering resources to affected regions. So we hope that everyone can stay home unless they have any special circumstances.
Suddenly Han Feng's phone rings, and it's the building's group chat again. It seems people are arguing in the group once more. Quickly the protagonist joined the conversation. Everyone was terrified by the new news, and that's why the discussion started. Suddenly someone asks if they really believe in these news reports. This was Uncle Lu saying that if things were really under control, the rescue team would have arrived a long time ago. He also recently heard that tanks and heavy vehicles are all heading towards City A, and that leaves only one remaining possibility. A war is about to start. Everyone remained quiet for a moment. Then the chatter began along with everyone's despair. Our protagonist had heard something about a war starting in his past life, so this must be true. Jiang says that if what Uncle Lu says is true, then they must start preparing to protect themselves. He says many people are already struggling, and they need to organize to provide first aid. So he suggests that those who have food should donate to those who don't, and he will start by donating half of the food he has in his house, also alerting that those who want to help should contact him. Quickly the murmurs among the residents began. One of the people says that Brother Jiang is right, and they should help each other, simultaneously asking if Hyona will contribute something. The girl, furious, thinks he is asking her among so many people because she rejected him some time ago. To get out of this, she says she doesn't have food even for herself, which starts another argument. Soon everyone was calmer again, and little by little, they decided what and how much they would donate. Jiang is happy with this, saying he wants to thank everyone and questions if they shouldn't put people in charge of this task. This way, the interim owners committee was formed, which would be responsible for all this. Our protagonist, upon reading this, remembers that this committee also formed in his past life and that it was just a scheme to take the supplies from other residents. Now it was already July 19th, the 5th day after the apocalypse began, and temperatures were already below -40 degrees. The central heating system was no longer working due to the low temperatures, which had frozen everything. Everyone was thinking of ways to keep their bodies warm. It's the same thing that happened in his past life, and things only tend to get worse from now on. Of course, none of this applies to our protagonist because he had almost infinite fuel and a cozy fireplace. He was comfortable to the point of drinking Coke and eating a beautiful piece of cake that looked like a PNG. In the cozy warmth of his room, he was now playing a zombie game on his video game, when suddenly someone calls him. Upon answering, the person asks if he is Mr. Han Feng, the owner of 1801, and says that the person on the line is the one responsible for Block 8, notifying that they are going down to clear the streets in 20 minutes. Of course, the protagonist was furious about this, but soon he went down to help since he didn't want to cause trouble with the neighbors yet, and end up revealing his secret unintentionally. But it seems the snow has already covered almost the entire entrance of the first floor. Noticing this, some become furious since they had cleared the entrance yesterday. Suddenly someone points at the protagonist, saying they need his help. They count to 3 to push the door, and when they reach 3, it actually opens. Thus, an absurd cold enters through the door along with a lot of snow. Everyone is impressed by the strength of the snowstorm. Our protagonist almost turned into a popsicle. Everyone starts saying that they can clear the place, but they will probably freeze and die doing so it's not worth it. Suddenly someone enters through the back door saying they are here now, and the protagonist recognizes this voice. It was the blonde, saying they shouldn't cower now. As he went to the door, everyone told him not to do it because it was very dangerous, and he could actually die since this is not a game. But he just took a stronger drag on his cigarette, and started running, attacking the snow as if it were his biggest enemy at the moment. He was even talking like JoJo, shouting, "Ora, ora, ora, ora," and so he actually disappeared into the snow, digging a hole in it. But soon he started screaming uncontrollably for help. When they managed to pull him out, The poor guy had already turned into a popsicle, so everyone decided to close the door again. Han Feng asks if the blonde is better now, but since there is no response, he starts talking about finding those responsible for first aid first before deciding what to do about the snowstorm. All this snowstorm is no longer something that can be resolved with just human power, so now we are in the parking lot. This is where the committee organizes everything and tries to distribute it. The protagonist thinks this must be the man known as Jiang from the group. He was responsible for creating that committee, which would be a scam that would screw everyone over, and the man was there, thanking everyone for their support. He himself says he didn't expect so many owners to donate their resources like this, and thanks everyone again. Of course, the thought of all the residents was to really help each other so they could overcome this catastrophe together. However, our protagonist knows that this won't end anytime soon and that Jiang will regret everything he's doing now. Suddenly the blonde announces that he's going up because he's freezing, and Han Feng says it's okay. But when he looks to the side, something catches his attention. A girl was asking for permission to pass, and of course, he steps aside. She seems quite clumsy, bumping into everyone while apologizing. Suddenly she loses her balance and is about to fall, but she is caught by our hero and protagonist. The girl shyly looks at him, thanking him, but soon realizes who he is. The first thing she asks is if his leg is already healed. This catches our boy off guard. Panicking, he tries to explain that his regeneration is good. Since childhood, he can recover from his injuries in just a few days. She is perplexed, looking at our Giga Chad. Then, with shining eyes and completely excited, she says that this is amazing. Suddenly the boy offers to help her while she says it's very heavy. But he doesn't mind, saying he's strong and that it's a thank you for helping him with the bandages. But when he picks up the boxes she was carrying, he realizes they are very heavy. He even asks if he can know what's inside the boxes, and she says they are medical supplies from her family that she will donate. With a cute posture, she asks if it's too heavy, saying she can carry them if he wants. Blushing, he says he doesn't mind. Suddenly she tells him not to be impressed since she's stronger than most men, which leads him to ask if this has been the case since childhood. But she denies it, saying this happened recently, and she doesn't know why. Still blushing, the boy is confused by her answer, so she apologizes, saying it's nothing much, that it happened suddenly, and she can't explain it very well. Turning around, she says she still doesn't know the stud's name. The protagonist, with his cheeks tomato red, says his name is Han Feng. She also introduces herself, saying her name is Jin Shui and that it's a pleasure to meet him. Completely captivated by the girl, the boy is left speechless, when suddenly the girl asks what he does for work, and he says he's unemployed, which she finds fantastic. Then she stumbles alone again and bumps into the protagonist, making him apologize, but she continues to lose her balance and almost falls on him, using him for support. When her giant airbags touch our poor protagonist, he almost catches fire from nervousness. The girl apologized this time, and he just says it's okay, and it's really okay. She could even do it again. Suddenly Hyona appears, asking why he didn't say he would be here. She already comes pressing her airbags against him too. Hugging him, the girl asks if this person with him is his friend. The shy nurse says they can continue talking because she doesn't want to interrupt, and thanks Han Feng. Furious, the boy questions why she is here, and she explains she came to get supplies, again insisting why he didn't tell her he would be here. To get out of this, he says he was about to message her, which makes the girl call him a liar, saying she saw him completely happy with the girl just now. But changing the subject and with a fake smile, she asks if he has some supplies at home, asking him to share a little with her. The boy, understanding her intention, starts to laugh mischievously. Then he says he doesn't have much food left, but he can share some with her, of course, if she responds to the message he sent a few days ago, asking if she wants to go to his house to spend a few warm days together. This catches the girl off guard, so trying to dodge, she says she doesn't know his intentions, and if it's just to talk, they should do it online. Turning around, he says she doesn't seem interested, so he will leave, but she holds him, asking him to wait, saying she feels he has changed recently, and he should know she has always been serious about her feelings. She doesn't want people to think she's with him just because he's rich, so she would like him to give her a little more time. However, the protagonist is completely happy, calling out her name, and I thought he might be a fool to fall for her talk again. But he himself says that if he hadn't been killed by her in his past life, he might have believed her. At this moment, he only wanted to expose this girl, and he would have done it if he knew the face of the man behind her. Suddenly he thought of something brilliant. He should just do as it was done in his past life and let Hyona bring the man to him again. So, looking at her, the boy says he was just teasing her all this time. This leaves her impressed with his response. Feigning surprise, he says he was just waiting for her response, and that he will send some supplies to her tomorrow, which makes the girl say he is the best. Turning around, she says she will go home and wait for him eagerly while our 𝔸𝕣ťί𝕔 simply tells her to be careful not to catch a cold. Of course, the wretched woman was plotting against him. However, it was also obvious that he was plotting against her. So the day passed, and the cold was more extreme than ever. His phone was receiving several messages from Hyona asking what he was doing and questioning if he would send supplies to her today. But our protagonist was ignoring all this because he was having a great meal in his apartment. As we can see, he was even sweating at this moment while eating. This is because there is no better taste than fresh meat in this enormous cold while leaving on read the bitch who betrayed him in his past life. Our video ends here because the chapters of the story are finished. This work is new and still being released, so let's be patient. If you liked it, leave your like and don't forget to subscribe because as soon as there are new chapters, I will bring them here. I'm asking for your subscription because only 10% of viewers are subscribed. So if you liked it, please subscribe. See you next time. Bye bye.